object to be present, and
Recording is on.
you don't want any other class to be creating any like any more objects for that class. One use case that comes to my mind where singleton pattern might be used would be a logger, because in logger you just want just one instance of the logger class in your entire application, right? You don't want to create multiple logs, because when you create a logger, what happens is you instantiate that logger, and basically it writes to a few files in your machine, right? And you don't want like different, let's say if you have in a multi-threaded application, where there are multiple requests coming in, you basically want all those requests, all the logs to be written in the same file, right? You don't want it to create new different files for each different request that comes in. So in this case, logger might be useful. Sorry, single pattern might be useful. Other than that, one example I can think about is like your database connections, right? You want just one object of your database connection, because a database connection is a very heavy object, right? It has a lot of details in it, like what is a connection and etc and so on and so forth, right? So in that case, it's useful to have a singleton pattern, just create one single object of your database class, and just maintain that as a global state in your entire application. Any questions here? Okay, so a very simple and straightforward way to create a singleton object is, basically the idea is we do not want any other classes to create objects for that class, right? So one a very simple way is using access modifiers, right? When there is something private, um, classes outside cannot access that thing, right? So one easiest way to do that is, let's say if I have a class logger, if I don't want any other classes creating objects um, for this class, I would just simply make the constructor as private, right? So if I do, uh, right, you're good to go, right? Because now any other class cannot create an object for this class. I can just show you here real quick. So if I try to do logger equals new log, it's going to throw me everything that, hey, okay, it's going to say there is no sorry, logger. Oops. Going to complain saying that there is no constructor available for this. Oh God, come on. Now it's going to complain saying that, hey, there is no constructor available for this class, right? So how do we get the object for um, one object for this logger, right? We need to have one object created, right? So how do we get that? So are you guys familiar with static keyword and what static does basically?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So static basically means that whatever thing that we declare as static, it means that it belongs to the class and not belongs to the object, right? So if you have a static variable, you can just call that static variable um, by the name of the class, right? Or if you create a static method, you can call that method by using the name of the class, because in Java, if you want to call any method, you have to create an object and then use that object to call that method, right? But with static thing, it's not necessary. Whenever you have static methods, you can just use the class name and call that method. So I would create one public static, which returns basically returns me the instance of this logger class, right? Logger get instance, and in here I'm going to return a logger object. So I'm going to create that here, private um, logger. If logger is sorry, if, logger is, why is this doing it? Okay, this has to be static because in Java it complains that you cannot access non-static variables from a static context. So this has to be static. If logger is null, create a new object of logger. me just return that logger here. Now in our application, we can just instead of doing this, we can just do logger dot get. Oh, come on. Dot get instance. And there you go. You have this logger object. Now, no matter how many times you write this, it's going to be the same logger object, right? Because we are creating logger object here just once, and just returning the same object again and again. This thing over here, this is called as lazy instantiation. Lazy because the logger object is not created unless someone actually requests for an object, right? So there are two types of instantiation. One is called eager and one is called lazy. If in case of an eager instantiation, what you'll do is just copy this. Sorry, let's copy this here, and you just return logger from here, right? So yeah, but it's always a good practice to have lazy instantiation because don't create something unless you really need it, right? So yeah. Okay. Any questions till now?
Can you just quickly run the code so that we could see how the singleton pattern is actually used?
Okay.
Just like returning some basic value or something.
Uh, so Krupal, I'll just request you. Just add one member variable inside the logger class, so that everyone can see over there that okay, the instance is being created only once.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
Actually, can I actually do this and see? So in this case, actually I can try with instance also, but I tried with this because you basically see this here, right?
yeah.
Uh,
It's the same instance. Yeah,
it's the same instance because you get the same memory, right? No
same memory. Correct.
matter how many times you create this, you're going to get the same instance everywhere. Okay. Any questions till now? Yep. All right. So if you look at this method over here, right, there is some problem with this method. Let's say if you are doing this for a single thread application, this would work just fine, right? But if you start with multi-threads, right, because currently our web servers works on threads, right, to make it really efficient, we work on threads. So in a multi-threaded environment, this is going to cause problems. Can someone tell me why? Any guesses?
I mean, in multi-threaded sort of environment, I think it will be the same instance being. So in multi-threading, we'll be creating different threads for. Each of the thread will be doing their own process.
Yeah,
So I think if we have a multi-threading setup, then the same instance will be available throughout.
which is what we want, right? We want just one instance to be available throughout. Why would be a problem?
Maybe because multiple threads might try to acquire this object at the same
Exactly.
time.
Let's say, okay, let's say our application just started and now we are making two requests, right? Let's say two people came in and made a request to our application, and for those two requests we created two threads, right? And now both the threads basically want to log something, right? There is no logger object created yet because this is a lazy instantiation, right? What will happen, right? Let's say both the threads like T1, T1, T1 and T2, they both come here, right, at the same time. It's possible that you get two objects, right? It's possible that both the objects try to do this, which is what we don't want, right? You-
Yeah, so that will be a deadlock.
Yes, not deadlock exactly, but they'll try to create two different objects, which is what we don't want. We want that it must always have a single object, and we don't want like someone coming in and doing it twice, right? Just one act. If this is executed once, we don't want to execute this things same thing again, right? Which is what we don't want. So this becomes a problem in a multi-thread and like environment. For people who are not familiar with Java, there's something called as synchronized. So basically, synchronize is a keyword which you can use to tell someone that, hey, if one thread is working on it, no one can come in and um, use that thing, right? So if I public static, if I do something like synchronized, okay. So if I do something like this, what this basically means is that if let's say T1 comes here first, right? Now T1 comes here first. T1 will basically acquire the lock for this method basically, right? Once T1 acquires a lock, let's say T2 comes in next, T2 will see that T1 has the lock and T1 has not released the lock yet. T1 will only release the lock once the entire method execution is done, and only then the T1 will like release the lock basically, right? So once T1 is done with this method, the lock is released. T2 comes in and sees that, hey, actually, logger is not null, right? So it returns a logger, right? So this is how we ensure that um, we just have we don't like that your method is thread safe basically. So this is called as thread safety. Thread safety basically means that if you are having problems with multiple threads, you just make it safe and not allow multiple threads to execute the same code at the same time, right? This is called as thread safety. Okay, now if you see this is also going to create some problems, some efficiency problems. Can someone guess what? Okay, let's say we have 100 lines of code here, right? Before this, what would happen? I mean, this is still going to work, but this is not going to be as efficient. Can someone guess why? Okay, so just what I said, right? If you make this method synchronize, what's going to happen is when T1 comes in, T1 is going to get the lock for this entire method. So when T2 comes in, T2 sees that T1 has a lock for this method, and T2 is just going to wait. T2 is not going to do anything. It's just going to wait until T1 is completely done with this method, right? But we don't really want that, right? This is the line of code which is creating problem for us. Not just this piece of code is what creates problem for us, and we want just this piece of code to be synchronized and not the entire method, right? It's fine if the entire the other method, let's say if we had another 100 lines of code here, right? It's possible. So in this case, we don't really want that T2 should wait for the entire thing to be done by T1 so that the T2 can enter, right? T, T2 can meanwhile do this thing, right? So instead of having synchronized keyword here, in that case, what we do is we create a synchronized block. And in this block, we just have this one piece of, oops, one single what this basically means is that only this piece of code is actually synchronized. T2 can come and T2 can execute this 100 lines of code. When T2 comes here, it sees that T1 is actually working here, so it waits, right? It's like that. And now we have this synchronized method, right? Any questions here?
I have a quick question. Mm, What advantage do we get of using a synchronized block against creating a method? Like maybe if there are 100 lines above and below it, we could just extract this to a different method and work. What advantage are we getting with using this block?
Just what I said, right? You don't want T1, sorry, T2 to wait for T1 to be done with this entire method, right? Let's say if we had synchronized here on top, what's going to happen is
No, no. Actually, no, that's not the case. Like you can just extract this specific thing out into a different method and make that method asynchronized.
ex-
If that makes sense.
extract
So
what?
that's how, sorry.
Extract what exactly?
So this the entire if block,
This.
you could
Okay.
just you could just extract it out to a different method and make that synchronized.
I mean, you can do
How
that, but
is
I mean, you can do that, but this is not a good way to do that, right? This is what is actually doing that get instance thing, right? So why do you want to continue with? I mean, it's up to you, but this is what is a standard pattern that everyone follows. Yeah.
got
Yeah. Actually, the synchronized block should not be here. It should be outside this if, because we want this if condition to be true as well, right? So yeah. Any questions?
Krupal, can you repeat one thing? Why we are using the synchronized in here basically, and all the functions actually. Why we need actually? If the object will create in the one person's, then it will be the static. Then other person when we will come, they will get directly. So why in here it is?
No. So what will happen is, okay, let's say we don't have to synchronize for now, right? Let's say we have two different threads. So you understand the concept of threads, right?
Yeah, I understood. When multiple thread, then others, so many processes continuously work
Yeah.
actually in there,
So
right?
okay. So let's say there is thread T1 and there is thread T2, right? Let's say
Okay.
both now want to create an object, right? Let's say we don't have a logger object yet. It's not instantiated yet, and both the threads basically come at the same time, and both the threads want to create this logger instance, right? Because there is no logger instance created, right? For both the once they get in here, what's going to happen is so let's say T1 comes here first. T1 sees that logger is null. T1 comes here. T2 comes and T2 also sees that logger is null because this is not done yet, right? So basically, T1 and T2 both are here. What's going to happen is T1 creates a new object. Okay, let's say at this point, okay, we have T2 here now. Okay, T1 creates this object. We have T2 here. Okay. T1 is creating this object. T2 sees that here, this is still null, so it comes here. It comes here. T1 is done with this. T1 comes here, and T1 basically returns this, right? Right now. T1 gets by the way T1 comes here again like this, and the T1 gets that new this object. T2 again creates a new object, and T2 basically gets a new object, right? So thread T1 had the old object, and thread T2 had the new object, right? Which is what you don't want. You want just one single object to exist in the entire state of your application, right? So this is going to be a problem when multiple threads come at the same time, and you don't have the object instantiated yet. Okay, that's a problem. Do you understand this problem?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So that's why we want that if one thread comes in and is executing this part of the code, you want no other thread to come in and do its stuff, right? So basically, in this case, T2 will just wait here, right? When T1 is basically done with this block, T1 comes here, right? And T2 comes in here and sees that that hey, logger is not null. We have logger instance created. So T2 just directly goes here and it also gets the same object. And that's how you maintain your singleton state in the entire application. Got it?
Got it.
Okay.
one more quick question. Krupal, can you just run the program to show the difference between using synchronized and not using synchronized?
I'll have to create multiple threads for that. I am.
Uh,
I
oh, yeah.
I have actually forgotten how to properly create those threads.
No,
Yeah.
and actually, it would also be difficult because two threads would essentially be created at a different time. So making them access the same object at the same time or
Basically
something. That's a
it's not it's yeah it's we have to be very lucky to see that
yeah. No, I mean just a general thing, like not like if you print something, just let's just see how they're pointing it to same and different objects. We saw one for same, but can we just see for different objects? Maybe we could just put like a simple print statement.
you want in a multi-threaded environment.
No, 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 not a,
Then
just a single threaded one. Just to see that logger always gives us a
okay.
same thread versus giving different outputs. Yeah.
So in the same thread, it's not going to be a problem. You won't even see this problem in a one thread environment because we are currently working with single thread, right? So in one thread environment, it's not going to be a problem. It's only going to be a problem when there are multiple threads, right? Now we are just
No,
working
no.
with one thread.
What I just meant is just with singleton and without singleton, just to see an output, and instead
Uh,
of this
okay.
hatch, we could just put in some number, so it's a little easier to understand.
So
Yeah, just put in some number 10 or something inside the get instance.
if we do this, it's obviously going to create a different object. So let me. You see this? Right? I see this. This is different. This is basically the memory location. This the hash code of the memory location of the object, right? So you can clearly see that when you do this, you get different objects. But when you have this, they just one single object, right? Okay. Any questions till now?
Sounds good, thank you.
Okay. Right. So the reason I did not come up with a design for singleton pattern for the entire logger thing is because I was reading online yesterday and singleton pattern should not be used. Singleton pattern is something which you call as a code smell or something which you call as an anti-pattern. Anti-pattern basically means that it's against the pattern and it should not be done. And I have seen and I went to lot of resources yesterday which say that you should never use a singleton pattern because it might create problems in future. First problem that is very obvious is that we are basically making a global state of the object, right? We are just having one object global in our entire application, which is not good. Why? Because in future you are guaranteeing that hey, you will always want a single object, right? What if like 2 years down the line your requirements change, right? What if now you don't want a single object? What if you want two objects to be there, right? Now you have to go ahead and refactor an entire code base which is already grown over these 2 years, and now it's very hard to refactor a code base to not use that single pattern anymore, right? So this is the general idea that you should not use singleton pattern. This is the one assumption that you're making which is not true. For example, the case of databases, right? Let's say in very old days we used to have just one server code and just one database. Now we have multiple database for multiple use cases, right? It's possible that you might need to create different database objects for different databases that you have in your system, right? So the, uh, this is one example of why you why you should basically not create singleton patterns. This is one. And the second thing is it's very hard to test, right? Because you know how unit tests work. So everyone's familiar with unit testing here.
Yes, yes, okay.
Yeah, so when you do unit tests, right, what you do basically, when you do a unit test, you basically try to mock the object, right? Um, let's say if you want to test some part of the code, you basically just mock like all the objects that's that part of code uses, right? For example, if in case of logger, you are trying to test something else, and now you want this logger instance. So what you do is you go ahead and create mocks of this logger. But if you use a singleton pattern for the logger, you can't really create a mock, right? You know why you can't create a mock? Because you are saying that there should be just one instance of a logger application, right? So in unit tests, it's really hard to basically test singleton pattern. So I think in interviews we should really avoid this, and we should not use singleton pattern, and basically come up with something else for our problem basically. Yeah. Any questions?
Krupal, just one very, very basic question.
Mhm.
Uh, so since we defined our methods as static, that's why we are able to use it directly. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay,
If you didn't have this as static, right, you need to create an object for this logger and then call this method. And now you are saying that hey, you can't create, I don't know, an object for
correct.
this class. So how are you going to do that, right? So that's why you declare this as static and just use the
So,
class name.
so,
So
so for so for get instance function, it makes sense to define it as a static. But define why did we use static keyword for logger variable line
yeah,
number 5?
okay.
Yeah.
Because how Java works basically. Uh, so in Java, there's a rule that in a static context, so this is a static context, right? In a static context, if you're using global variables, you cannot use non-static variables in a static context. This is an error which you get. You see this non-static field logger cannot be referenced from a static context. So if if you are referencing something which is a global variable from a static method, that global variable should also be a static basically. So that's the rule in Java.
Okay. Okay.
I'm not sure if this is the rule in any other languages, but this is a rule in Java, so that's why I have to make this static.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Krupal, I have one.
Yeah.
If we have if we know that we just wanted to create one thing that will be global for all the users and all the means in whole project,
Yeah.
then we can use the singleton, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Then why this thing it will create this actually?
Sorry.
Just like for example, we just want to create the database, the connections,
Yeah.
right? So I think it will be the single one for all the users or in the whole project. So if we will use this singleton
Okay.
functionality, then this thing it will create the issue actually. I'm just asking.
Okay. So you're saying that it might not be a problem, right? To choose singleton.
Yeah, yeah, you are just saying that it will be the create some problem in the future, right?
Okay.
So this thing it
Because
will create.
now so in the context of the interview, you have a set of requirements, right? You have set of requirements, and you see, okay, fine, for these requirements, I think this will work, right? Because now you're saying that you just have one database, and you just need to create one database connection, right? In the context of interview, like in the requirements that you have for that point of time, yes, it's fine. But what if down the line now you want to use two different database in an application, right? It's possible, right? Because currently with distributed systems, what you do is you don't have just one single database instance. You have multiple database instances because you have one master database and then you have multiple replicas of that database, right? What if you want to create multiple database connections for your application, right? Let's say 2 3 years before, you had just one single database because your app was not popular, so your app was basically scalable with one database. But what if 3 years down the line your app became so popular that you cannot really scale your application without using multiple databases, right? Now you want to create multiple database connections. Now you can't do this with your code. You have to go back and change your entire code base to not use a singleton pattern, right? Because everywhere in our code base you would be doing something like this, right? And now you're saying now you want two different database connections, so you will have to remove this private, and then in our code base you go ahead and change all the lines that do something like this. So that's the problem, right? When you say you will need just one object, you have to be really 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 sure that you'll need that single object, right? And this is not the case. Requirements do change, like all of us are experienced here, so you know that after some point requirements do change, something does change. And we basically need to make our code which is like not which is very extensible. When I say extensible, which means that it it can adapt to change and we can easily add new things in our code, right? So when you are creating a singleton object, if in an interview something seems like you should create a singleton object for that, don't, because interviewer might definitely ask you, or just think that you don't really see sometime in the future. So yeah.
So Krupal, I mean, in that case, any alternative that we have, I mean, let's say we have to implement logger in our project or in our design. So
Uh-huh.
any alternative for apart from singleton?
Yes. So Tanvi raised her hand, right? What did you have any question? No, you have not. You're speaking on mute.
Oh, sorry, I accidentally did that. You can go
Oh,
ahead with the existing
okay, okay,
question.
fine. Okay, yeah. So yes, so we do have that. So basically, what we do, I am not really sure how we do that, but let me try. Right. So
Actually, sorry, one more generic question. If it's
yeah,
before you proceed, it's so
yeah,
we we added the private method before the constructor so that we cannot create multiple instances.
yeah,
But uh, just sometime back, like we create when we use a new keyword to create the instances. At that
yeah.
time, we were able to create multiple of them. Then how
No,
does the
I actually removed the private and then did
oh,
that.
okay. Sorry, sorry.
Yeah, you can't do it without this private, because this private, right? I had to remove that private and then do new. Okay.
Oh,
So coming back to answer this question, okay, let me try to remember that. Okay, so let's say if you want to use this logger, right? So mm, let's say we have something like logger client, right? We have something called logger client. What we do is, the best way to do is just do something like this: private logger, and then public logger client. So I think this would be a good way to use a logger. So basically, what this means is that hold on. Basically, what this means is that now you have this logger client, right? Your logger client is basically the piece of the component which wants to log something, right? And it doesn't want a singleton object. What we do is, um, so are you guys familiar with dependency injection?
no, no,
So
Krupal.
dependency injection, I would not go deep into that, but just on a high level, dependency injection basically means that you are not creating objects explicitly. You are depending on whatever framework you are using to create objects for you, right? So what you do is basically just I think you add some keyword here to say that, hey, you want this is a dependency, and you want this dependency to be injected here. So basically, when you try to create an instance of logger client, you don't really create an instance of logger client, right? Your framework is going to is going to give you the object for logger client. You just ask the framework, hey, please give me the object for logger client, and the framework that you're using, it's going to create those objects for you, and it's going to give it to you. And in that case, you are not explicitly creating this logger object. Your framework is actually is responsible to create this logger object. And yeah, so I think this is one very good alternative to using singleton pattern in this case. Questions?
Yeah, so basically, I mean, we'll be I mean, along with singleton, I mean, basically we can use singleton in a dependency injection context. I mean, that's what you
No, this is
mean
not a
over here.
singleton. That's what I'm trying to say. You should never use singleton. When you're saying singleton, singleton means that just one state of the object in our entire application, right? You don't want that. You never should have one single global state in our entire application. That That's what I'm trying to say. That you should never have a single instance.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
going to be problematic. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Got it.
But then, sorry, so someone was saying something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my question is, although we are using dependency injection under the hood, does it not do something similar to what we have done?
I'm
It,
saying you should not use singletons.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But then dependency injection essentially gives us a new object whenever we need that, right?
Yeah.
So now instead of we having to use the new keyword and create these new
Hmm.
objects, sorry.
Yeah.
So would it not be doing a similar thing like a singleton pattern under the hood?
Yeah. So basically, it
Like,
does
do
the
you
same.
have any?
It does same thing, but so it's a good practice to use dependency injection here. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say. Because unassociated, what would be an alternative if you want to do something like this, right? This would be a good pattern to use, wherein you actually use dependency injection to get that dependency for you.
Got it, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Right. I think if there are no questions, I think that's it from me.
So, Krupal, so logger client will provide us the object for whole one. It will be the different, yeah, will be the same
I
whole.
think it's not going to be different. We are saying that it's going to be same. It's sorry, it's going to be different. Because that's what I'm trying to say. Right? You should not have a single instance of your object. So basically, it really depends on the use case, right? So in your sorry, in your dependency injection thing, you can actually tell like what kind of like objects you want, right? So
So basically, it is the just as a common that we are using just new.
what happens is,
We are calling the object for the new one, but it is the something different. We are calling different type of the calling. We are
yeah.
object, right?
So basically, when you so I don't really want to go deep into dependency injection because it's a topic in itself. But on a high
Yeah.
level, let me tell you this: when you're using dependency injection, you basically tell that okay, for this class, I want one object per request. I want one object for the entire state, or I want one like object per thread, or whatever, right? So in your dependency thing, you can actually specify what kind of instance do you want. Do you want one global state for this entire instance in an entire lifetime of your application, or do you want one object, one single object per request, or let's say if the same request is also doing multiple threads, or do you want one object per thread or something like that, right? So yeah. So let's say we start with singleton, right? Let's say now our application really wants a singleton object, right? What you do is you just specify in a dependency section that hey, now just get me a singleton object for this logger thing, right? Let's say in future your requirements change and you don't really want singleton. Now you want multiple things, right? Now you can just go ahead and change your dependency injection thing, and you just say that hey, please do not create any singleton objects anymore. Just create one object per request, and you are good to go, right? With this code you are not breaking anything, right? This code will really support a singleton or whatever kind of thing that you want, whatever number of objects you want, right? So with this thing, you really do not need to refactor a lot when it comes to changing your application. So that's why this is a good pattern to use. Yeah.
Okay.
Does this make sense or it's just confusing?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. All right. I think that's it for me. Let me share my screen share.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah.
you,
So,
Gopal.
Gopal, that was sorry.
No, go ahead. I just thanked him. Thanked him, sorry.
Yeah. That's what even I was coming to. So yeah, I mean that was a good explanation around singleton from you, Kripal. Just one more thing. I mean, we actually, I mean, yesterday regarding yesterday's session, we actually wrapped up around OOPS concept, and we were still left with solid principles. And yesterday we decided that, I mean, okay, if we'll just go through the solid principles, and if we have any questions around them, we can take it today. So, I mean, did all of you got a chance to go through the solid principles? I mean, if we have any questions around them, we can take them now.
Yeah, I went through that. I don't think I have any questions.
Okay.
I've
Uh,
gone through high level, so probably like if I go through some problems and then I'll get some questions.
I mean, this is just to ensure that, I mean, we are on the same page. I mean, as we move ahead, solving problems next. I mean, in our next sessions, just to make sure that, I mean, all of us are on the same page. So, yeah, I mean, if we don't have any questions, then I think we are good for today. And I mean, we can quickly discuss. I mean, what what all things do we need to take up next?
Sounds
I
good.
mean, yeah. I mean, as we had this session today, like, I mean, we just took one pattern, and we understood. I mean, we just went through the pattern and pros and cons around that pattern. So we can similarly we can pick up different design patterns which are there next, and we can just go through the pros and cons and the best practices around them. I mean, in our next sessions, so we can take up any problem, solve them, and around that we can also discuss certain design patterns that we have around that problem.
Okay. Actually, can you bring up
Okay.
your notes so that we can see?
Sure. So I'll just share my screen. Yeah, just let me know if my screen is visible. Yeah, is my screen visible?
Yes.
So I mean, I'll just add the I mean, whatever we discussed today. I'll just add it in the I mean, after the basics of design pattern, basics of low level design. I'll add it over here, and the next we can pick up problems, and we can just add all of those over here. So I mean, if anyone wants to go through other design patterns, I mean, by themselves, I mean, I had just curated over here just 6 7 design patterns are over here. 6 is over here. I mean, I have to add strategy pattern, another one over here. I'll add that, and if you want to go through them, you can just go through them from here.
Okay.
I mean, we have the code examples over here, so you can just go through the simple code examples.
Okay. I think we can pick up two patterns. Right. I think two people can volunteer. I think we can cover two patterns in the next session, I guess.
In the next session. Okay. Okay, I'll pick up the factory method. I'll pick up the factory method next.
Okay.
And actually, I mean, we can do factory method and abstract factory together. I mean, there's not much. I mean, there is a difference between both of them, but I mean, not much difference. We can discuss that under one session.
Okay. So can someone pick up like builder in that case then? So would you think we'll be able to cover this in 1 hour?
Uh, I think factory and abstract factory. I mean, might take, because I mean, I'm just saying this because I mean, the other patterns that we have, those won't be requiring much time. Factory and abstract. I mean, abstract factory is. I mean, there are certain nuances around that, and I mean, I think it might need some more explanation. I mean,
Okay.
we can do. I mean, either we can do factory and abstract factory together, or we can. I mean, I'm saying that we can take factory and abstract factory. I mean, whenever we do that, we can just take under one session only.
Okay. Okay. I think then it's just do just one thing then.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, factory and abstract factory would be good for next then, I think.
Okay. Then I'll just prepare myself, and I'll just prepare the notes as well along with that for the next session. So I mean, for the next session, I mean, are we meeting next weekend, or shall we meet during the weekdays? I mean, any one day during the weekday.
During weekday, I
And
think
whichever
only
is,
Wednesday would be possible for me.
yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, whichever is more comfortable with everyone. So, I mean, we'll just go with that. Okay. I mean, we can then take it the next weekend only.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in the group, I mean, I think some of you might have not gone through the solid principles. I think Krupal, you shared yesterday in the group
Yeah.
uh, that link for the solid principle. So I also have this one reference over here. I mean, you can just go through the link shared in the group as well as this reference as well. And I mean, for the next week, I mean, for the coming week, I mean, if you have any questions around solid principles, we can take that in the group chat itself.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and we can do the discussion over there. And for the next weekend, I mean, we'll just go through the factory method and abstract factory.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. Any other concerns? Anyone?
No. And
Okay.
one thing,
Yeah.
if I will try to, if someone need know, then I will also provide the 10 to 15 minutes for the solid principle also to explain for myself also.
Yeah, definitely. I
In the,
think yeah, you're most welcome to do that. And we can keep 15 minutes for discussing around solid principle, and then we can move ahead with the factor method.
yes.
Okay, then I think we are good for today, and we can just wrap up it for this weekend. We'll just meet next weekend, same place.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks everyone. Thanks,
Thank you.
Rupal.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all. Bye.
Thank you everyone.
Thank you everyone. Bye.
Thank you.